everybody. Hey, Ellen.
Hi, Karen. How are you?
Are you,
Mrs.
are you
Q.
go, are you going to make it to evacuation day?
We're going to try. We're absolutely going to try. I said because it's so far enough in November, we don't have any weddings or other historic events or anything. I said, oh my goodness, it's been crazy.
Great, great. It's going to be great. We're still in the planning phases, but it is going to be so great.
The
Everyone,
talk looked wonderful. I wish we had been able to get out, but we had already made plans for that weekend with Canal Day here in Waterloo Village. And it was fun too, but you looked like you had a wonderful
I
time.
had a great time. As a matter of fact, it opened up a whole lot of opportunities for other things I'm going to be doing as Mrs. Q that I think you'll all like. Here we
Wonderful.
go. The McCabe's are here from Fredericksburg. Oh, it's good to see everybody again. I missed you all last Friday, but I hope you were watching me in Setauket because I had a fantastic time in Setauket. And I want to thank everyone out there who were so welcoming to me and so friendly and brought me all around, introduced me to everyone. I met more people than I can, even remember having met, and just had a really wonderful time. And that has opened up some opportunities. Let me fix my dress here. That has opened up some opportunities for some Mrs. Q on the road adventures. So I will be going back out on the road and seeing some more things in Setauket, and either posting the video later or live streaming it. So some of those things are in the works. And let's see who else is here. Oh, it's great to see everybody back tonight. This is great. And one of the things, and she may even be watching right now, is if you saw me, I spent some time with an 18th century cook. And she was making a pudding, and I tried it. It was very good. And I think I will be inviting her to perhaps teach Mrs. Q how to make a Christmas pudding live with Mrs. Q, and maybe you can all watch. So I think that will be lots of fun. So I have some other things coming up that I think you'll like. Mr. Jensen wants to know, will the walk with Mr. Madison next Friday be on Zoom? No, it will not. The only way to watch that is to buy a streaming ticket and use the link in your streaming ticket to watch. So that is the only way, and you can use, that'll be streaming on a private area of YouTube, and you can enter the chat there to speak with us. So that is next Friday's Mrs. Q Live will be in the afternoon with Mr. Madison, and that will be a paid event. It's not that expensive. So please, join us and support my and Kyle's efforts. Both of us are having a very slow, tour business. He's in Philadelphia and I'm here. So we decided to do this little tour and live stream it. And those of you in the New York area who haven't bought tickets to come in person, come on out and walk the town with us. It's going to be lots of fun. And for those of you who are out there, get a streaming ticket. And by the way, those streaming tickets will stay active after the tour is over. So, you can buy a ticket, and if you can't watch it next Friday afternoon, you can watch it anytime. And for those of you who are coming in person, you'll get a link to that recorded tour, and you'll be able to watch it again in the future too. So trying to make the whole thing as accessible as possible. This is an experimental thing I'm doing. And if you guys all help to make it a big success, I will do more of these. Some of them just as me. I'll just do a live Revolutionary War tour for those of you who've always wanted to take it but aren't coming to New York, and I'll do a paid live stream, and we can just all do the Revolutionary War tour, the Hamilton and Burr tour, or the Culper Spy tour. We'll just do it all together, and you can watch via live stream and buy a ticket to that. So if this works out well, I'll be planning to do some more of those in the future. I'll tell you, one of the things I really want to do is do a live stream tour in costume of the Trinity and St. Paul's graveyards for Halloween. And I'm going to see, they're both closed, but I'm friends with the vicar, so I'm hoping he'll let me go in and do it. The live stream will be at 1 p.m. on October 1st, next Friday, and you can get tickets at patriottoursnyc.com. It's right there. It's right in the middle. It's the Mrs. Q and James Madison tour, and you just hit on the buy tickets, and then you'll have a choice to buy either a live or a streaming ticket. All the way from the Bronx. Yes, the cook was neat, and she is the real thing. So I'm hoping she's watching tonight, and Diane is watching tonight, and that she'll be joining us for a very special Mrs. Q Learns to Bake a Pudding. Because we all know Mrs. Q isn't very good at these things. So that's the first thing I would like to promote is the tour with Kyle Jenks next Friday afternoon, New York City, when it was the capital city of the United States of America. And we'll be talking about all kinds of great stuff, you know, the inauguration, the first Congress, what it's like for Congressman Madison. Mrs. Q will be covering all of the social aspects. You know, did you know that there were 330 tavern licenses issued when we were the capital city? 330 tavern licenses. What is that all about? So we'll be talking about, you know, the nightlife and the entertainment going on at that time as well. And we might be chiding Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Madison a little bit, because he's known to not be very much of a social functionary. And of course, he is a single gentleman, and there are lots of eligible ladies in the city who, you know, would be very happy to be seen on the arm of Congressman James Madison. So, you know, we'll be talking about that besides the more serious aspects of what's going on. Kathy, the tickets will not be on sale after it's aired. So they'll only be on sale up to the airtime, 1 p.m., but you can buy a ticket and watch it later. So you're not limited to you know, watching it then. I'm going to try to make them available after it airs, but I am selling the ticket through a ticket selling platform called Fair Harbor, and I do not believe they allow tickets to be sold after the time of the event. So unfortunately, you'd have to buy it by 1 p.m. on Friday in order to watch it later. And that's just a restriction I'm bound by Fair Harbor. So I apologize for that. So back to Setauket. Thanks everyone for having me. It was great. Did you see me with the musket? Did you see me learning to handle a musket? When Major Talmadge handed me the musket, it was so heavy, I almost dropped it right on the ground. Completely unexpected how heavy that was. So that was a fun lesson for me to learn. And of course, you all saw that it was about a foot taller than me as well. So that was lots of fun learning about that and just learning about all of the other things. I got to interview Anna Strong. So it was great fun. And I'll be cutting up those live videos and re-releasing those as smaller videos that are more watchable. So I'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks. And you may already know, some of you know, I haven't announced this to the public or shared the link yet, but I have to my patrons already told them about this, that tickets are on sale for the Evacuation Day tour, which will be November 20th, Saturday at 1 p.m. I'm sorry, the Madison tour is at 3 p.m. Both Kyle and I keep confusing this. The Madison tour on Friday, next Friday, is at 3 p.m. So tickets will be on sale until 3 o'clock Eastern time. The November 20th tour is at 1 p.m. and those tickets are on sale at francistavernmuseum.org. That tour is going to celebrate Evacuation Day, the day the British finally left at the end of the war. And I will be having two co-hosts on that tour. One of them, someone I'm sure you all want to meet at last, my sister, Mrs. Van R. from Albany, will be accompanying us on that tour, and she will have quite a bit to say about the horrendous condition of the city. As you know, my sister, Mrs. Van R., lives a very nice life in Albany. And she also has just become, you know, through marriage, related to Colonel Alexander Hamilton, who will be my co-host on the tour. So for the full tour, I will be joined by Mr. Alexander Hamilton. And if you come on the tour, you'll get to speak to Mr. Hamilton and Mrs. Van R. And along the way, we might run into one of those Culper spies. I think he's going to be in the town, one of those Culper spies. So we'll be running into him, I think. And we'll be running into a loyalist who's not sure what's going to become of him. And we'll be talking to him. We'll be running into a soldier who has returned and is looking for his brother, who has been lost since the Battle of Long Island in 1776. So that's 7 years he's trying to find his brother. And maybe Mr. Hamilton and General Washington can help. General Washington will be on the tour as well. So it's going to be a great afternoon, November 20th. Because it is sponsored by Francis Tavern, that is not a streaming tour. So you do have to come live to attend that tour. And those tickets do go to benefit Francis Tavern Museum. So it's a great cause, and we're all going to have a really great time, and we'll have props. Everyone will be dressed very nicely, of course. And we'll just be talking about the end of the war and what everybody, is expecting might happen. So I will share the link for that tomorrow, because I'm still giving my patrons a little bit lead time to get tickets, because there are only 30 tickets available for that tour. We got lots of people watching tonight. So tonight, I would like to talk about some interesting coincidences that all occurred throughout the American Revolution in September. So some very interesting things that happened in September, but a few years apart. So let's talk about some of that. So the first thing we'll talk about is the Great Fire of 1776, which I think some of you already know about. I released as my modern self a little video about that a few days ago. And on September 21st of 1776, a quarter of the city of New York burned in a massive fire. The fire started in a dwelling or an inn right near where Francis Tavern is today, and burned to the north all the way past St. Paul's Chapel. So that's about almost a mile that it burned up Broadway. When it was finished, about 496 structures were destroyed. Now, it started between midnight and 1 a.m. And there was a great deal of confusion, of course, because it was the middle of the night. Nobody knew what was happening. And the bells that they rang to inform people that there was a fire had been confiscated by Washington's troops to be melted for musket balls. So there were no warning bells either. The only thing people had really to put out the fire were these fire buckets, these leather fire buckets that they made. And of course, those were small and completely inadequate. So there was a lot of wind that night. It was dry, it was hot. Embers like flew from rooftop to rooftop. And before you know it, the whole city was on fire. Now, British ships saw this fire, and of course, Trinity Church burned. The 100-foot steeple of Trinity Church. People said they could see it burning against the black night sky for miles around. Well, British naval ships moved in to try to see what was going on. Troops came into the city and tried to figure out what had happened with the fire. They also tried to stop it, not very successfully. But what they did was they began searching people's homes. And they decided that anybody who had any type of combustible materials, think about that. Everybody has combustible materials. You have a fire in your cooking fireplace. You have a fire in your bedroom fireplace. You're burning candles. You're burning oil and fat lamps. Everybody has combustible materials. They arrested everyone who had a particular type of matches that had a type of coating they were looking for. They arrested everybody, whole families sometimes. They killed people on the spot, executed them right there. They shot people. They also threw people into the fire as a punishment. Horrific what the British troops did that night to the people of New York. And of course, it turned out that the fire was completely accidental, having started in that dwelling somehow. And eventually the British came around to admitting themselves that it was an accidental fire. But a quarter of the city was destroyed. It gave the British the opportunity to finally come into New York and take full possession of the city, which they did. And 2 months later, by the end of November, they took the entire island. Now, while all of that confusion was going on concerning the fire, some of General Howe's men captured a young man coming into New York City. He was from Connecticut. He was a graduate of Yale College, a good friend of Major Benjamin Talmadge, and his name was Captain Nathan Hale. And you might know he was fighting in the Connecticut militia, Thomas Knowlton's Rangers, and he had volunteered to spy for General Washington. He met with Washington, has making his way into New York, gathering information on what the British were up to, what their plans were, how they were deploying, how many troops they had, what kind of artillery, what sorts of arms, everything he could find, and writing it down and putting it in his boots and in the pockets of his clothing. Well, when he was captured by the British, he was, of course, wearing civilian clothes, and they caught all of that other stuff hidden on his person, as well as his commission papers from Thomas Knowlton's Rangers. So when they saw he was an officer, a soldier, traveling in civilian clothes, they immediately declared him to be a spy. found him guilty of spying and sentenced him to death, which was carried out the very next day on September 22nd. And young Nathan Hale was 21. He was hanged right around the Dove Tavern, which would be about 6th Avenue and 3rd Avenue and 66th Street today. And of course, in school, everyone learns his last words were, "My regret that is, I just have this one life to give for my country," which turns out to have been attributed to him later by his fellow soldiers, as they did not want his death to go, unnoticed and unnoted and to be so meaningless. And so Nathan Hale is hanged. His body is thrown in an unmarked grave and never returned to the Americans, which leaves a very hostile feeling among his, fellow militiamen from Connecticut and the command of the American military. So we kind of forget about Nathan Hale, and we can fast forward now 4 years to 1780. When yesterday, on September 23rd, a bunch of skinners or robbers working the Hudson Valley found a gentleman traveling from Tarrytown to New York City, and they grabbed him. He had some valuables. They decided to rob him and search him, and they couldn't figure out if he was which side he was on. Was he on the American side? Was he on the English side? And this gentleman himself couldn't quite figure out which side to tell them he was on. So it was a bit of, going back and forth there. But this gentleman, who called himself John Anderson, did have in his possession a pass handwritten by General Benedict Arnold, promising him safe passage from Tarrytown to New York City. And all he had to do was show this pass. So when these three guys, these three, let me say, they're going to be remembered as heroes, but Major Talmadge really thought they were lowlifes and of the lowest class, he said. When these gentlemen or these robbers saw the pass, they said, well, we'll just hand him off to the nearest Americans then. So they brought him to the nearest American encampment, which was the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons, commanded by a Virginian named Colonel Jameson. Well, when Mr. Anderson told his story to Mr. Jameson that he was, a messenger moving on behalf of General Benedict Arnold, and showed him his pass, Colonel Jameson decided to send him back to Arnold at West Point and gave him an escort back to West Point. Well, then someone named Major Benjamin Talmadge arrived in the camp because he was an officer in the 2nd Continental Light Dragoons. Major Talmadge was also Nathan Hale's closest friend from Yale. He also by then was running the Culper spy ring. And he knew that John Anderson was a name that was being used on the British side for a very key British operative. So he told Colonel Jameson to get John Anderson and have him brought back to the camp, which he did. And when he returned to the camp, Benjamin Talmadge noted in his memoir that he had a great deal of frustration with the colonel and his naivete. He said he was a fine man, but very naive about the ways of the English, because he said when he saw John Anderson, it was clear to him that this Mr. Anderson was born to arms, meaning he was a born aristocrat. Talmadge could tell, he said, by the way he walked and by the way he turned on his heel. So he said he went over to him and introduced himself, and he said, "Why, sir, I am Major Benjamin Talmadge, and I would like it if you would tell me who you really are." And he said at that time that this gentleman turned to him and he said, "Why, sir, I am Major John Andre, Adjutant General to Sir Henry Clinton. And if you will bring me a pen and paper, I will write to your General Washington my entire story." And at that time, Benjamin Talmadge was shocked that he now had standing before him John Anderson, the spy master of the British Army. And we now had the two gentlemen spying face to face for the very first time. And I can only imagine what that moment of recognition must have been like, as these two gentlemen were very similar. They were only a few years apart in age. They were both very well educated. Major Talmadge from Yale. Major Andre was educated in Switzerland. They were both finely educated, had fine manners, very intelligent, officers in command of their various countries, honorable gentlemen, and both spy masters. An incredible moment in American history, completely by accident that these 3 robbers happened to catch John Andre, who had just met with Benedict Arnold and was carrying with him the plans to West Point, the deployment of the American soldiers, and information that General Washington was about to arrive and what day he would be there and which senior officers would be there with him. Imagine had John Andre made it to New York City with that information, but instead, completely by chance, he got robbed. And now he's standing face to face with Major Benjamin Talmadge, who said that as he watched Andre write this letter telling Washington the whole story, he said he shook in terror, knowing what they had just so narrowly avoided, absolute destruction of the American cause. Well, also in that letter, Major Andre, who's a very intelligent gentleman, right, tells General Washington that he was traveling under the invitation of American General Benedict Arnold under a flag of truce. And that under the law of flags, he could not be prosecuted for this in any way, as he was traveling as a messenger between sides. So General Washington gets the letter and he asks that John Andre be brought to him, and Major Talmadge escorted John Andre to Tappan, where he was held a number of days while they tried to figure out what to do with him. And they decided that just like Nathan Hale, he was an officer, he had been traveling in civilian clothes, and that he needed to be tried and tried as a spy. Washington gathered together some of his most senior officers to sit in trial of John Andre because he had heard all about John Andre's fine personality, his incredible charisma, and that John Andre had a talent of making everyone like him. Washington wanted to be sure that his most senior and self-controlled officers would sit in judgment of this young man. Why, even Mr. Hamilton, I think at that time, Captain or Colonel Hamilton, agreed that John Andre couldn't be prosecuted because he was traveling under that flag of truce. So some very interesting disagreement went on General Washington's staff. Well, John Andre was tried, he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to death. And when Sir Henry Clinton got the notice of this, he wrote to General Washington. And again, he said, you can't do this. You're breaking the law of flags. John Andre was traveling under invitation of your, General Benedict Arnold, and he was not a spy. And of course, the American side didn't really buy that, but they did decide to have a negotiation. And someone from the American side met with a messenger of Sir Henry Clinton's at Stony Point, and they discussed whether or not a trade might be made, a trade of Benedict Arnold, who by now had escaped into New York City, for Major Andre. As General Washington said, I have no desire to execute John Andre, and I know you also don't, so let's exchange them. I'll give you back Andre if you will give me Arnold. And in the end, Sir Henry Clinton turned down the offer. He said John Andre was worth 5 Arnolds to him and was like a son. But that if he agreed to this, no other officer would ever turn against Washington. And as a result, on October 2nd, 1780, John Andre was hanged, just like Nathan Hale, in Tappan, New York. Now, Andre himself expected as an officer that he would face a firing squad, and didn't know until the last moment that he was going to be hanged. But just like Nathan Hale went to his death completely composed, an honorable officer and gentleman to his last breath. And many years later, the British, I recently found this, the British actually compared Nathan Hale and John Andre as both being fine young men, both highly educated, esteemed gentlemen who died in service to their nation as gentlemen, never looking to avoid the punishment themselves or to implicate anyone else or to turn on their brothers in arms, both of them highly regarded gentlemen and officers. So what a coincidence that almost 4 years to the day that Nathan Hale was executed, John Andre was captured completely by accident. Now later, when Major Talmadge was asked what he thought about, the hanging death of John Andre, he said it was tragic. He said it was indeed tragic that this fine man met his end. And he said that he himself found it to be a very difficult thing to comprehend that such a fine young man, such a gift to his country, had died while the traitor Benedict Arnold lived. But he said in the end that Andre had a fitting demise. Even though it was hard for Talmadge himself to accept it, he said the end was fitting. So what do you know? Do you think that firing squad didn't happen because of Nathan Hale? Do you think in the end, John Andre was hanged because of a bit of vengeance for the way Nathan Hale was so brutally treated? His body was left hanging for 3 days before they cut it down and just threw it in an unmarked grave. So do we think there might have been just a little bit of revenge going on there? But incredible. Imagine had those robbers not caught Major Andre and he got back to New York. Now, later, in the diaries of William Smith Jr., who is known as one of the finest historians of New York during that time, he said that his conversations during that time with Sir Henry Clinton had been rather puzzling to him, because he said Clinton seemed completely uninterested in countering the Americans. He said the Americans were massing quite successfully at Rhode Island, and Clinton seemed to be completely uninterested in confronting them there. And he said he could not make any sense out of Sir Clinton's attitude about this. And he said that Sir Clinton told him when they talked about it, he said, Sir Clinton said something, to the effect of, well, I'm not concerned because I feel that the Americans will crumple any day now, and that the American cause will completely implode on itself. And Mr. Smith said that he had no idea what Sir Clinton was even alluding or thinking to, but looking back on it after the capture and hanging of Andre, he realized that Sir Clinton had really based a lot of faith on the plot with Benedict Arnold to have access to West Point, to capture Washington, and to foil the American plans. That Clinton had, as we might say, placed all his eggs in one basket. And that when that didn't come through, Clinton found himself now in the inferior position in the New York area. So what a great story, right? And I will be doing some more on John Andre. I know that because of that TV series In the Future Turn, a lot of you ladies are in love with John Andre. I know that he is very well loved in the future. And I tell you, he is a crafty one, that John Andre, because apparently he claimed to love various ladies here in America. But when he went to his death, the only picture he carried with him of a lady in his locket was a lady he had been engaged to many years before, Honora Sneyd, who apparently was the only woman he ever loved, and the others were all just for his enjoyment, and maybe he used them a little bit as well. So that crafty John Andre, I know he was very charismatic and handsome and all those things, but he was our enemy, don't forget. And as Benjamin Talmadge said, he met a fitting end. So now, if any of you have any questions or comments, I'm going to look through your comments and questions. Oh, I have some people who say they have live stream tickets for our Friday at 3 p.m. tour with James Madison. That's fantastic. Mr. Madison is very much looking forward to it. And I may be making a new jacket for that. So if you watch or you come live, you just might be seeing a brand new Mrs. Q outfit on Friday. It depends how fast I can sew. So we may be seeing something new on Friday. And let's see. Do we have any other? I'm glad. Oh, people like the Setauket videos. Thank you for watching. I had so much fun. They were great. Miss Langdon, I am working on getting to Staten Island. I was in touch with the ladies who run Historic Richmond Town, and I have not heard back from them, but I think they close at the end of September. So my opportunity for that may be finished, but I know there may be some historic churches I can visit in Staten Island. So I am working on that. One of the things I am working on, and I'll be working more on this tomorrow. Oh, it's Margot from Setauket is here. Hi, Margot, and thank you for having me. One of the things I will be working on over the weekend is a visit to Raynham Hall, Robert Townsend's home, museum and historic landmark. You may know that Robert Townsend was the gentleman called Culper Jr. who operated in New York City as part of the Culper Spy Ring. So I'm going to be working on getting to Raynham Hall for you and doing a tour of that. And I don't know if that will be live stream. I think that'll be a recorded tour. I'll edit the video and then release it. So you'll have a really nice video to watch without all the flubs of live streaming. Yes, that was Culper Jr. And I am really excited about going there. So I'm happy to be going there. And thank you to Margot to introducing me to the person who can help make that happen. And also introducing me to some of the people who will be on that evacuation day tour. And I think that, Anna Strong may be attending incognito on that tour. So a lot of great things are going to be happening there. So come out and see us for evacuation day in November. Now, of course, I've never seen television, but I have heard from you ladies in the future that the actor who played John Andre was quite impressive and quite attractive. Now, for you ladies who watched me in Setauket, was that red coat handsome or wasn't he? Yes, I'm getting some thumbs up. For an Englishman, an enemy, a grenadier, and a red coat, he was tall and handsome, I have to admit. 6'2". Oh my goodness, was he good looking. If you haven't seen it, go over to that live stream and just fast forward to that red coat. He was, oh my goodness, he was quite handsome, I have to say.
He was charming.
He was, wasn't he? And his knowledge. He was very knowledgeable and very polite, quite the gentleman and officer when we had our conversation. That is a good question. Oh, Margot says, don't tell Mr. Q. I did tell Mr. Q. Don't you think he was handsome? Oh, Mr. Q is used to that sort of thing. He doesn't let it bother him. We've been together now for about 250 years. So, that sort of thing doesn't bother us anymore. It's been lots of beautiful ladies and handsome men who have traveled through our lives during that time. So we're used to it. I don't know. Maybe Margot can answer this question. Margot, we have a question from YouTube. Do we know for sure what any of the people in the Culper Spy Ring really looked like? Are there any portraits remaining of Anna Strong or Abraham Woodhull or Austin Rowe or Caleb Brewster or Robert Townsend? Are there any portraits of them? There are portraits of Benjamin Talmadge, of course, because he, went on to become a wealthy man and could pay to have his portrait painted. So later in life, his portrait was painted with his sons, and his wife's portrait was painted with their children as well. Margot says there are sketches of Benjamin Talmadge, which some of you may have seen. I have seen those too. And we have a comment from Facebook. Another incredible coincidence was how Henry Knox and John Andre spent the night together in a shared cabin when Knox was on his way to Ticonderoga, and Andre was a prisoner that was later exchanged. Yes, they discussed all they had in common, which was a great deal. The next time they met was at Andre's trial, and it pained Knox a great deal. And that is true. The American officers were quite disturbed at the death sentence and hanging of John Andre, because they considered him, like them, to be a well-educated, fine, and honorable man. So I think Henry Knox's experience with John Andre was probably similar to that of Benjamin Talmadge, all of them being educated gentlemen, unfortunately in service to opposite countries now. And Margot says that the only she knows of is that maybe there's a portrait of Robert Townsend. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. Yes, for those of you guys out there, I am trying to get to 1,000 YouTube subscribers. I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel. You guys have all been wonderful about following me on Facebook. I have a good following on Facebook, but I need more YouTube followers. If I get to 1,000 followers, I can start to monetize my website, my YouTube channel. So please come over to YouTube, like my channel, and watch my videos there so that I can get a little income there. Tour income is crappy, so however you can support me, here's my, I forgot to show, here's my little donation page. So even if you want to make a little one-time donation, these are the ways you can make a one-time donation, or you can become a monthly patron on Patreon. I appreciate all of that. Plus these streaming tours I'm going to be doing, please get tickets and come on those with me as well, to help me earn some income. Things in New York, I hate to say, are so awful that I believe I'm going to have to start restricting my tours only to Saturdays when Mr. Q can come on the tour, because the last few tours that I've done that have had only me and a few women, we have been, shall I say, very aggressively accosted by people on the tour route and unable to find any police officers to come to our aid. So I think I may have to withdraw to only doing one tour a week. So if you would like to support me in these other ways, please consider doing so, because I'm really not going to be earning much as tours. Oh, thank you, Margot. Margot says she'll spread the word with her followers. All of you, please share my stuff with whoever you think will enjoy seeing it. I'm going to be doing a lot more YouTube video in the hopes of growing that YouTube channel. And of course, I put the video on Facebook. For the first time today, I put a video on Instagram. I felt like I was so advanced putting a video on Instagram because I don't use Instagram very much. So I'm going to be trying to grow my Instagram audience as well. So I'm just going to be working on a lot of social media so that what I'm not going to be picking up in-person tours here in New York City, I can maybe pick up out there in the virtual world. So please, subscribe and share my channel, follow me on Facebook, and also, feel free to, tell me what you'd like me to do tours about, or tell me what you'd like me to do videos about. Would you like me to do them as my 21st century self, talking about the relationship between the 21st century and the Revolutionary War? I can do some of those. Do you prefer me to do them, from the time period? You guys tell me what you'd like me to do, and that's what I'll do. Ms. Felder says that she liked my remarks on Nathan Hale and John Andre. And thank you, Deb. You're in Texas, right? The Republic of Texas. Wow, one of our future great states of Texas down there. And Margo was telling me to be sure to use hashtags on Instagram for the turn followers. Good, I'm getting some great advice from here. Someone would like me to see if I could have Townsend. I don't know if there's anybody who is a history interpreter who does Townsend. So I would have to find out about that. And of course, that there will be a Mrs. Q and Alexander Hamilton live stream coming up as well. Right now, Mr. Hamilton and I are working very hard on our evacuation day tour, but perhaps before that, Mr. Hamilton will join me for a Friday evening, and you can have an evening with Mr. Hamilton and talk to him as well. Yes. If you are on the South Shore of Long Island, you might want to check out the Ketchum Inn, where Diane is the cook there and is on the historical staff. And I think there's an event that's going to be coming up. You can check them out on their website, the Ketchum Inn. And I will be joining her there, I think, for a Mrs. Q. I think we'll be doing that live from there. You still have to talk to her more about it. More on the revolution, how it got started. Okay, so let me know what sorts of things you'd like me to talk about as Mrs. Q. So thank you all for joining me tonight. It's been great seeing everybody. Of course, there'll be no Mrs. Q next Friday night, because instead I'll be walking through the town with Congressman Madison. And feel free to let me know anything you'd like Congressman Madison to address on that tour. He will be talking about how the Bill of Rights came about and what he thinks about how the implementation of the Constitution is going. And Mrs. Q, I think, is going to be teasing him a little bit about his lack of social life and the fact that there are so many eligible, beautiful ladies in New York who would love to spend some time with Mr. Madison from Virginia, and just how captivated we all are by his Virginia accent and all of those things. So he's quite a gentleman. So we'll see if I can embarrass Congressman Madison a little bit on the tour. So be sure to join us, and it's going to be great fun. And let me see, I think we have the Amos Underhill Boarding House and James Rivington. Yes, those are all on my New York City Culper Spy Tour. So maybe I'll do a streaming version of that you can buy tickets to, and we'll do a live stream of that. And Mr. Cipolla says he'd rather spend some time in person with me. Well, that's always more fun, but it's a big country, so sometimes streaming is the best we can do. And I think I'm getting to be pretty good at interacting virtually. I think I'm getting the hang of it. That's going pretty well. So I hope to see a whole lot of you next Friday afternoon, and I will be back in 2 weeks here for a Live with Mrs. Q. Everyone really have a wonderful week. Stay healthy, and I look forward to seeing all of you. And tomorrow on regular social media, I will post the link for the Evacuation Day tours. So thank you, and a good week to all. Thank you so much for your support.
Good night, Mrs. Q.